All right, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah. So my name is Martha Sharpe, and back in 2019, I decided to teach myself how to code. Um, I didn't know whether it was going to work for me or if I would even enjoy it. So I decided to not go to a boot camp or do anything that was too big of a commitment. I was just using free online resources to kind of figure it out, free code camp and code academy, etc. And it turns out I kept going, so that was great. And about and when I first started, I knew that, speaking of networking, I knew that I was not going to look good on paper. Like someone who's just learning to code on their own, they're not going to have any kind of certificate or anything to recommend them. So, um, there was another person around that time named Shante Austin. I don't know if anyone heard of her, but she was kind of LinkedIn famous around that time. And she ended up getting tons of companies approaching her because she did a 30-day app challenge where she built a small app every single day. Um, and that got a lot of attention on LinkedIn. So she had like Facebook and I mean all sorts of different companies reaching out to her. Um, and I thought, I better take that approach. That sounds good. I want people to come to me. I don't want to have to pursue them and try to prove myself to them. I want them to come to me because they already know what I can do. Um, so even when I first started learning, I decided to be pretty active on LinkedIn, sharing my journey, asking questions, and even did some like coding demos of the things I was building, um, just so people could get to know me and what I could do. And another thing is, I wouldn't know when I was actually ready for a job, right? Because I mean, when you take a course or something, the teachers are like, "Oh yeah, if you do all this, then you'll be ready." But that's not necessarily true. Like you're ready when someone looks at what you're doing and be like, "Oh, they have the skills I need." So it's really the companies that tell you when you're ready. No teacher or anything like that can tell you when you're ready, right? So I figured if I was doing all this in public, eventually people would start approaching me and I would know I was ready because people would be approaching me, right? Um, Now it started kind of happening a year after I started coding. Why am I telling my entire story? Like I'm this is supposed to
I'm
be a
so
brief
into it
intro.
now.
This is supposed to be a brief intro, and then we're supposed to talk about AI stuff, right? That's what it's supposed to be. I just haven't done a talk for so long that I'm like remembering myself who I am. I'm like, who am I again? Okay. Yeah. So anyway, I was active on LinkedIn as I was learning. About a year later, the pandemic hit and all the hiring freezes and stuff. Actually, the current situation is reminding me of that situation, believe it or not. Because tons of hiring freezes, tons of layoffs because of this whole COVID thing. All these businesses are being like, whoa, we got to batten down the hatches. We don't know what's going to happen, and getting really insecure and tightening up. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a terrible time to try to find my first coding job, right? um, and I decided to stop. I decided to stop applying for jobs and just keep learning. So I decided to pick up React Native. And it turns out my first LinkedIn post about starting to learn React Native, someone reached out to me and wanted an app built. Just some entrepreneur who wanted an MVP built. So I got a little freelance gig. And then I did a video demo of that app that I built for him. I got paid to learn. Like seriously,
Love
I just starting to learn React Native. And he's like, here, build this for me. I'm like, okay, I'm just starting, right? Like, yeah, cool. Okay. Um, so I did a demo app. I actually posted that on Twitter. Believe it or not, Twitter or X is also a great place to network. Um, and uh, someone from a startup reached out to me because they needed a React Native app built too. They're like, oh, we already know this person can do this, so we'll just hire her for cheap, right? They were in California, so they got me for cheap, right? I mean, compared to who swooped up again. Once you get your foot in the door, that it gets much easier. Like people know they're not taking as much of a risk on you. Um, so anyway, so yeah, and then another company swooped me up and then they did layoffs, which affected me. And then I got an even better company after that. So, one door closes, another one opens. And now I kind of got in a risky situation. Like I couldn't find a job. Like it wasn't working. The networking wasn't working like it did in the past. Like this is tough times. Like, and no one needs to tell you that because everyone's already complaining about it everywhere. But once again on Twitter, someone had like this pre-seed startup. That pre-seed means they don't have any money, right? But the founders were able to pay me a little bit out of pocket while they were fundraising, trying to get their first fundraising. And good news, they just got their first round of funding.
Your
So they can
provisional
keep
paper?
paying me. Like tomorrow is literally the end of my contract. So it's like right in the nick of time that they got
Universe
some
is
money.
looking out for you. I love it.
Oh my gosh, I was about to hit the job market again. But that was my plan. Once again, I'm like, okay, I'm not applying for jobs. This sucks. And it does nothing ever happens when I apply for jobs. Like nothing happens. So my plan, if they didn't get this funding, was to do what I did before, is keep learning and building and sharing and bring people to me somehow, because there are job listings out there, guys. There's people looking for people, you know? Um, so anyway, so that's my story. Um, so now I can go into the talk. um, Talking about AI, okay? Wow, I wish that we had AI when I was learning how to code. I really, really wish I did. Because man, it's made learning things so much easier since then. Like I just the project I'm working on has a Go backend, and I've never worked on the back end. And even the little back end I have done has been in Node.js, right? More JavaScript. But I needed to do some changes to like the kind of emails that were sent and when they were sent, etc. So I'm like, okay, let me tackle this. And I kind of read through the code. I'm like, okay, well, here's where an email is sent. So I'm actually using a tool called Cursor. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's actually an AI IDE. It's a branch off of Visual Studio Code. Okay. So the great thing about this AI, uh, it's a code editor and it can search your entire code base. Okay. So if you just use ChatGPT, you have to copy paste the code and be like, okay, or copy paste the error code or whatever. Um, but this can search your entire code base and be like, so what I did was I found this one function that was kind of what I needed, but it was written in Go. So I'm like, okay, the syntax kind of weird or whatever. I'm like, okay, Cursor, this is kind of what I need to do, but I need to do it this way and this way. Can you adapt it for my needs? And then it's like, oh yeah, sure, blah, blah, blah. It's always so polite and friendly, right? And then it gave me this code snippet. I'm like, oh, that that's making a lot of sense, except I'm not passing in data here. And I even told it that I'm like, yeah, except in this case, I'm not passing in data. And like, oh, in that case, then here, that even simplifies it more. Here you go. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna see how this works. It looks like it's doing what I needed to do. Um, so based on that example, and this isn't a language I don't know, right? I mean, and not only that, but after I joined this team, we're working in Vue. I've never worked in Vue before. Ever since I've joined, I've been a React developer, but ever since I've joined, I have never once looked at the Vue docs.
Because of AI.
I've never looked at the Vue docs. Never. I don't have to. I'm like, I mean, first of all, once you learn one programming language, you kind of have the idea of what's happening. Like you can read through a code base and be like, okay, here's the logic for this. This is just it's just the same logic. It's just different syntax, right? Um, So you do have to kind of get the gist of what's going on, but you can ask AI, like, hey, AI, like, what the heck does this piece of code do? Like, please, or if it's like super complicated, like there have been portions where it's like nested for loops, like this for this do this, for this do this, for the nested for like loops are a nightmare. I'm like, okay, help me out here. Simplify this code without nested for loops. And it's like, okay, here you go. Blurp. I'm like, and I have to read through it, understand what it's doing, run it, test it. I can't just copy paste and be like, yay, I'm set. Um, but that is a huge headache gone. Um, so AI is our friend. I'm just putting it that way. Everyone is terrified that it's going to take our jobs. And I'm going to say, based on how much more productive I am as a developer, I can see how you won't need as many developers. So yes, probably not going to need as many developers going forward. But the ones who are going to survive are the ones who are going to learn how to use these tools and leverage them to be even better, right? So I'd say from my last job, before I started using AI, let's say before I started learning using AI, I was probably like mid-level developer. Um, since I started learning AI, I'm like, it just shot me into senior. I'm I'm like, I don't even have to ask there's other more senior developers in my company. Hardly ever have to ask them questions or pair program with them at all because I've already got a senior engineer in my pocket who knows everything and knows the entire code base, basically. Callie,
Yeah, is it okay if I ask a question?
oh yeah, I'm talking too much. Interrupt me.
So I feel like my hesitancy is that one of the ways that I learned to code was like never copying code I don't understand. And so like I'm kind of a cursor is the tool she was using, by the way. So like I'm hesitant to use AI because I don't want to become too reliant on it. And how do you like solidify that learning? And like what do you do in order to make sure that you're not just like copying the code and then moving on because it's easy? Like I feel like I learned through the struggle, and like that's my hesitancy to like move to AI too much is like, I don't know, like I feel like the joy of struggle I'm gonna lose. Is that weird?
The joy of the struggle, you do learn a lot. Pain is an excellent teacher. It's true. Pain is the best teacher. When something causes you pain, you will remember it because you want to avoid that pain.
Yeah.
um yeah, so I would say there's enough pain in coding already. You don't have to worry about it.
Do
you
you
know like
mean the things that you're learning from AI, or do you feel like it's like necessary to keep using it in order to continue to keep up with the speed? Or are you learning things and like, oh, now I'm Googling or now I'm AIing a more difficult concept because that level, I'm actually leveling up. Does that make sense?
right, so what you're talking about is like a deeper level of understanding versus just being able to get stuff done,
Yeah.
right? So I would say I am much more in a get stuff done frame of mind, and my everyone loves that. Like it's really just the CS graduate nerds, purists that are gonna hate the fact that you're using code without understanding the computer science concepts behind it or whatever. But you do get a gist of it. So it's kind of like riding a bike, okay? You can ride a bike without knowing the mechanics of a bike. Like, I watched this YouTube video about how the mechanics of a bike works, and I never knew any of that stuff. And it's crazy. But I know how to ride a bike, and you can get really good at riding a bike without knowing and on the flip side, you can know all the mechanics of riding a bike and be terrible at it, like not be able to even
Yeah.
ride it, right? Um, So like Vue, for example, I said I never read the Vue docs. If I wanted a deeper understanding of how Vue works, I would probably want to read the docs. Or I could just ask AI more questions. Like instead of just getting the code done, I could be like, now why does it do it this way? And how is that different than React? And oh, is this kind of like this? And I have come to kind of an understanding of some things like Vue's version of like memoization and like in React, we have use effect and use state, but in Vue it works differently and etc. So I have kind of grasped some of the concepts along the way. But you know what? I did the same thing when I was learning without AI too. I just grasped the concepts along the way while I was building and doing stuff. Um,
Oh, I'm the same way, Kelly. Like I want to have like a deeper understanding of what I'm doing when I'm learning it. And I think AI is really good for that. What you can do is you can ask them questions like, why did you decide to do it this way? And the
Okay.
AI will tell you,
mhm.
it explains it to you. When I'm learning with AI, if there's something that I don't understand, I'll be like, why did you choose this data structure? Or why is it written this way? And it'll go deeper and deeper. If you just keep asking questions about it, it'll explain it to you like it's your own tutor. It's actually
Okay.
really
So I
powerful.
need to I
I
need to let my prejudice or whatever's in me go and give it a try, like broach the waters. I can still have deep understanding and use.
absolutely just keep asking questions.
Okay. Maybe my
Yep,
mentors at work will
exactly.
thank me for it because I'll chat them less.
And I remember feeling so at one of my first jobs, I remember feeling like such a pain when I bugged one of the senior developers to help me or to explain something to me or just walk me through some code or pair program with me because they're busy, they got stuff to do. Not only that, they're not necessarily good teachers or good at explaining things so I can understand, but but I actually have to convince myself that ChatGPT is not getting annoyed at me. You know,
I
like
love
I
that
have this
so
reaction, like, oh, I'm asking it too many questions, or oh, it's just ingrained in me. I'm like, wait, it is not a person. It will not get tired of me asking questions. It will not get annoyed at me. I can stay up to like 4 a.m. asking it questions and it will not have to sleep. Like, this is, but it's so hard to get out of that mentality because of my past work experiences where it was hard to like bug people or to pin them down to help me. Um, so anyway, so that is one thing. It's like having a senior engineer in your pocket to answer all your questions or pair program with you or anything, right? Um, yeah, and the struggle, what else could I compare it to? Yeah, you learn a lot through pain because you want to avoid future pain. It's true. Um, but companies
okay with
don't
it not
care.
the struggle as long as it doesn't get so easy that I don't do the deeper learning. But I like Dan's point that I can use AI to get that deeper learning.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
I can kind of keep on keeping on. I'm just nervous my like impatient self is gonna be like, oh, here's the answer, go. You know what I mean? And then like I don't need to worry about that. But I feel like I do need to worry about, but maybe I don't know. I'm having an external like an existential crisis right now during your talk. So I'm gonna write it in.
Okay, now another tool. Okay, so I talked about Cursor, but of course I started out just asking ChatGPT questions. That was the first one I tried out. And then a friend of mine said I need to start using GitHub Copilot, I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's just an extension you can get.
Do you
Um,
feel like he's helpful? Because I feel like he's the least helpful junior developer I've ever met.
You know what it helped me with? I've actually recently disabled it because sometimes the autocomplete like takes up super like 20 lines. I'm like, this is not what I want to at all.
But
Go
yeah,
away.
that's not
You
the direction we're going in, Jeff, you know?
Um, but I mean, it has helped in the past. Before I discovered Cursor, I was using it and I was appreciating it. Um, uh, here's another thing it's helped me with a lot is TypeScript. Resolving those TypeScript errors, finding different ways of resolving it. There's usually several different ways of resolving TypeScript errors, right? But I learned TypeScript on the job, and it's really different than learning JavaScript or anything else because it's I tried finding tutorials and all sorts of things, and it just killed me. I couldn't figure it out, you know? None of my normal ways of learning things worked with TypeScript. Um, Eventually, I just got the gist of it through trial and error, through pairing with other people who knew it better, etc. All those red squigglies, you know. But guess what? AI knows TypeScript. So I'm like, okay, here's the error. What do I do? It's like, oh, do it this way. And then I learned through that. We are geared as humans to learn through watching and imitating. Okay? That's just how we naturally learn. Reading concepts in a book is actually extremely unnatural way of learning. Watching and imitating. That's why I learned so much just pair programming with the more senior members on my team. I'm like, oh my gosh, just sitting here watching him code, I'm learning so much, you know? And so it's the same thing when I see the solution that the AI comes up with. I'm like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Or, oh, and you just get used to the patterns. You get used to the patterns. You watch what it's doing, and it does give its reasoning. That's the great thing, is it never just gives you the answer. It's always like step by step. This is what I'm doing and why. So yeah, TypeScript was a big one. Um, I haven't, ooh, I haven't used it for writing tests yet. Oh my gosh. Oh, my world is so much easier, guys. Oh, it's so much better being a developer in a world with AI. It's only going to get better. Anyway, my life just got so much easier.
I just post this video and I think you'll end up getting a job for like an AI company because they'll just be like, oh my gosh, this girl loves AI. Let's give her the shot of marketing right here.
Well, it's like I know marketing, yeah. Well, that's another thing is that see, there's pivoting too, right? So in my current job, I'm not just a developer. I mean, I was hired as a front end developer, right? But because it's such a small startup, I'm acting as like project manager and designer and now a little bit of back-end engineer and marketing and I mean just oh yeah, and technical recruiter. I was finding candidates, as you know. So I'm doing like all these things, and this is the kind of thing that is going to happen with AI, is like the people who know how to leverage it. uh I mean, being able to wear lots of different hats and fill many different roles is going to be so important. You know, the specialization, when you're specialized in one thing and that's the only thing you can do, that's when your job is the least secure, right? Like, you only can do one thing and that one thing gets replaced, you're done. So if you can bring value, how do you bring value? That's the main question, right?
I love that.
Uh, because no, let's face it, no one owes you a job. No one owes you a job just because you're a human being. Like, I mean, they're the companies aren't charities. Um, they're looking for people who will bring value to the company. Um, so, and that might be in front end development or back end development or design or marketing or all of the above, you know, just like, so if you can show people what you can do and the value you can bring, then they will bring you on, basically. They'll be like, okay, we need this person. um oh yeah, career changing, yeah. And that's the thing, is a lot of people get into coding from something else, like they were in something else, it's not paying the bills, it's not cutting it. That's what happened to us, you know. And just like, wow, you mean I can get into coding just by learning some stuff, and that's gonna be the kind of pay I can get? Like, what? um but it's not easy, especially since it's so competitive, you know. Now with the market being flooded by all these layoffs of like super senior people, like there's some extremely qualified jobless people out there, right? But kind of the advantage of trying to get into it now is that you're willing to work for a lot cheaper than any of those people. um and I don't mean that is, I mean, like, it's like I said with my first full-time job, is like it was it was still a dream to me. It was a dream salary to me, but for them, they were getting a great deal from someone not living in California, right? Um, they would have had to pay like 3 times as much for someone with more experience, especially someone in California. So like these people who are being laid off by these super high paying companies, they're probably looking for salaries in the 200,000s or something. Like if you market yourself for 100,000 or less, like they're gonna be like, oh wow, this person's a lot cheaper. um so anyway, yeah. Um yeah, any questions? I don't know. I've been rambling, but I've gone from all sorts of different topics, but in terms of AI or even networking or different things, um I haven't been looking at the chat either.
I'm curious.
Mhm.
Are you a career changer? I think you said that you were.
Yeah, I was actually a stay-at-home mom for like 10 years, 9 years before I got into coding. Um yeah, my husband actually got into it first, Nat Sharpe. He went to a coding boot camp though. He needed a you need a lot of self-motivation to be able to just learn by yourself at home. So having the whole cohort and assignments and stuff really helped him. Actually, the same with like working from home. Like I do fine working from home, but some people have a terrible time because they don't have the camaraderie and the motivation of being in the office. Um, so that's why I we kind of switched roles, is that I work full time and now he's with the kids full time. So yeah, I'm a career changer and so is he. He became a full-time dad and I became a full-time developer. um, yeah, and before that I had no relevant experience at all. Like I have a college degree, but it's in like classical languages, like Greek and Latin. Like interestingly, though, when I first started learning JavaScript, I'm like, this is like a mix between learning Greek and learning calculus. It's like calculus and Greek mixed together, you know? It's kind of a fascinating experience. um, oh, and if you're interested, I did make a video after I got my first full-time job. That's called I forget what it's called. It's like quit your want a job, stop applying or something like that. It's like basically just saying like stop applying for jobs. That's what I did, and that's when I got my first job. I hope that advice helps people instead of hurting them. I would hate it if people took that advice and then it like screwed them over, but it really has
Really
helped
the same
me.
advice I give. The only jobs that I've gotten one job from applying. The rest of all the offers I've gotten have been, hey, I saw your LinkedIn post, want to have a conversation? And that's how everything else has started.
Yep. Yep. The same with me. I've never gotten a job applying. I've never even gotten an interview applying. I've never, yeah, nothing. Nothing.
The only one I got, it was a very local company. I live in Michigan, so there's not a lot of applicants. And I applied
Ah, okay.
to a local company that's not in tech whatsoever. They wanted a developer. That was just the job title. Developer.
Just a developer.
Yeah. And I think I was one of like 2 people that applied, so it just wasn't very, hard to get.
hmm
What advice would you give for people? I get a lot of, in terms of like networking and stuff like that, a lot of people who say like, well, I can't do it, or like, I don't have that personality type, or like, it wouldn't work for me, or like, what would your advice? And like, is that true that you think that there are just some people who can't network and put themselves out there, or like, how would you get started if you are feeling nervous about it?
I was really lucky that I had Nat to encourage me. You know, I mean, in fact, that would be some good advice, is to find someone who can encourage you. Like if you're feeling really neurotic, I remember my first my first demo video I ever made. I think it's only like 3 minutes long or something, but I spent hours making it because I just filmed it and refilmed it and refilmed it, and I was just so nervous about it. And finally, I'm just like, okay, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna post it, and here it is, you know. And eventually, it got easier and easier. Um, and then I started actually enjoying it. So I'd like build a project just so I could do a demo video. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to be done so I can make a demo video, you know. Um, but I didn't realize I didn't have to wait till I was done. I could have shared the process too, you know. Um, so yeah, find someone who can encourage you and take just do little things. I think people really responded to my authenticity, like that I was just really just genuinely learning and curious and sharing my struggles and sharing my triumphs and asking questions when I was confused, because I knew there were a bunch of people on LinkedIn who were much more experienced and they could answer my questions, you know. People get so opinionated about things too. It's hilarious. All you have to do is say, you're learning some new tool or some new technology, like, oh, I just tried Tailwind or something, and everyone's gonna drop their opinions about the best and the worst tools or whatever. Um, yeah, but yeah, just showing, yeah, so different personalities, yeah. So having someone to encourage you, being willing to like just try simple small things and just simple small posts, like not having to think too much about it, you know. One thing that when I was like trying to fine tune one of my posts or like putting way too much thought into it or something, he'd be like, okay, probably no one's even going to see it, you know, like why are you putting so much thought into this? This is when we were starting out, you know, and you know that sounds like it's discouraging, but it gave
No,
me
but I
courage.
love
I'm like,
it.
oh, yeah, worst case scenario, nobody even sees it. Like that's or and there's no such thing as bad publicity either. So if anyone sees it or comments on it, even if it's negative, it's like, oh, I'm getting some screen time here, right? So it's like and then not being too worried about follower count either. It's more follower engagement, you know? So like for example on Twitter, I you know, LinkedIn wasn't working for me. Like I wasn't getting any leads or whatever. And Nat, once again, he's see, if it wasn't for him, I am I am not a techie person. Like before I started learning to code, I was never on my computer at all. I was like outside doing stuff. I've never been a screen person. Um so he's the one who was like, you need to get on this and you need to get on this and you need to do this. And I'm like, okay. He's like my coach, you know.
Oh,
But it's like Twitter,
support
he,
husband.
huh?
Love a
Yeah, it's good. But saying like actually I have another video I made that was like LinkedIn versus Twitter. So I kind of made a comparison in that video too. I'm remembering all these things I did once upon a time. Um but like Twitter, I only had like a couple hundred followers when I got my first job through Twitter. I mean, yeah, it was through Twitter. So my first freelance gig was through LinkedIn and that was wonderful. But then my first full-time job was through Twitter. And that's what I realized was the people on LinkedIn are the people looking for jobs or recruiters. Generally speaking, you know, generally speaking. But the actual like entrepreneurs and developers who actually have jobs or I mean, they're on Twitter. Twitter's the place to be. I mean, X or whatever, you know.
Here's the thing, that's where I draw the line is at X. You know what I mean? I was like, Twitter, sure. But then it was like, now it's X. I'm like, I just can't bring myself to make an X account, you know? Do it.
Yeah, you just go where the people are. I don't know. I mean, it's just you got it. That's where I got my current my current job right now. It came from someone who is no, he wasn't even following me. He's following someone else who was following Nat, and Nat posted and she retweeted, and then he saw the retweet. Anyway, so it's networking. This is the essence of networking, right? It's like it wasn't even me doing a post. It was someone else doing a post, and then another person retweeting that post, and then someone who followed that person who saw it, you know? So it's like, whereas on LinkedIn, I guess it's kind of like that, but anyway, now I'm digressing. What are we talking about?
More questions.
Twitter.
Do you have any questions?
Yep. Compared to LinkedIn. Yep. Oh, and then LinkedIn also is just such a downer nowadays too. I hate, I mean, it's just such a downer nowadays. How about, that's another thing, is being more positive. So like I just the last couple of weeks, I've been like, maybe I should just stay off LinkedIn because it's just so depressing lately. Like people telling their sob stories of how they haven't had a job for months and their savings is gone and they keep getting turned down and basically begging for help or whatever. And once again, no company is a charity. Like companies aren't charities. Like those posts, I mean, what are they trying to accomplish? But I'm like, okay, I can either leave LinkedIn because it's depressing, or I can post about other things to try to make the feed a little nicer. So like I posted a funny dad joke I found, and I posted a meme that I found, and I'm like, come on, let's make LinkedIn a fun place to be again, you know? um yeah, so and I think, okay. Here's why I think people liked me on LinkedIn, is because I was using it like Twitter without even realizing it. I was posting memes, I was doing short little snippets of like, wow, my brain is fried. I just learned this, blah, blah, blah. That's not a huge long LinkedIn post with all the marketing and emojis and stuff. That's just someone sharing where they're at in the moment. And that's like what Twitter is for. Like that's what people do on Twitter. I didn't even realize it because I wasn't on Twitter. But that's what people really liked. And I was sharing memes and funny jokes that I'd heard and different things. And um, so people like that too. But I was also posting like demo videos and what I was learning and stuff. But it was like people liked it. um, I think maybe Shantae's approach, like who I mentioned earlier with the 30-day challenge, that might be a different approach someone could take. You got to kind of know what your strengths and weaknesses are and where you shine, you know, and not necessarily just copy other people, but do what works for you, find what works for you. Because yeah, if you are trying to become like a LinkedIn influencer, personality, whatever, and you don't have the personality for it, you're not doing yourself a favor, you know, because then you're just faking and you have to keep faking. Like if someone hires you for that, then you just have to keep faking the whole time. Well, well, good job if someone hires you for that, because that means you're really good at faking, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, I'm digressing once again. But any other questions? Oh yeah, saw LinkedIn job posted 10 minutes ago and had 400 applicants. Yeah, don't apply to jobs. It's a terrible idea. Well, I did apply to one job. There was one job I saw. I think it was on Indeed or something, back in 2019 or whenever that was. And I could tell it was written by a real person. Like, and it turned out it actually was like an entrepreneur who had this idea for an app, and he was looking for a React Native developer, and it was like a bartending app, and I was a bartender in a former life or whatever. So he actually did reach out to me, and because it was specifically, I could tell he was a real person and he could tell I was a real person. So like out of the blue, these two real people connected. But most of all, most of the time when you're applying to jobs, you're not talking to real people and they're not thinking of you as a real person either. So, whatever. Yeah, oh yeah, that's another video I made about React Native. I was getting nowhere with React. There's way too many React developers out there. And it's very competitive. But as I was looking at jobs, that can be one advantage to at least looking at the jobs out there is what people are looking for and what's in demand, right? And I saw all these listings for React Native. And I knew that that would be much more specialized. Not only is it more specialized, but I was actually interested too. I'm like, oh, mobile development. I always wanted to try that, you know. But I think React Native developers are much more in demand than just plain React developers, just from what I've seen. Even this last round, like I was this close to getting, there were like 2 different people that were interviewing me for a React Native like contract position, versus React. So if you find yourself at a loss with the skills that you have, pick up another one, I guess. Or you can focus on back end or something, because and become more of a full stack developer, because there's a lot more listings for full stack developers right now than there are for front end developers, I've noticed. So yeah, just
Want even only front end develop, because if you guys have watched my videos, I jump around all over the place when I'm coding. Do you just have to plan so much when you code and talk so much to a back-end developer in order to like know what request you're making, what the data shape's going to be looking like that you're going to get from the back end, or do you use all mock data? Sorry.
Oh, you're asking me how do I be like a
Yeah,
strictly a
but I don't think
developer?
I could do it. I'm constantly hopping from the front to the back end, and I just don't know
Yeah,
how I would draw the line and be like, well, I'm only going to do this and someone else is only going to do on the back end.
right. So working as a team, so basically the way I like to describe front end development is basically you have the ideal front end development situation is you have a design and you have an API and you just make it happen in between. You
Oh,
make
it's
you
the
make
API would already be done then if
the
you
API.
do it perfect world.
Right. It
Okay.
gets messy. It gets really messy for front end developers if either the API or the design is not done yet. And I've been in that situation. My last company, we're supposed to create this app and the design wasn't done and the the API wasn't done and the component library wasn't done. Like none of this was done when I was hired. I'm like trying to get the gist of what's happening. And I'm like, okay, so no one's in charge. There's no there's no project manager. The API is not done. The design's not done. And this component library we're supposed to be using isn't done. All right. And then I decided if there's no one in charge to handle this mess, I guess I'm going to step up and prioritize and make sure stuff gets done, you know? Because my company prior to that, it was like clockwork. Like there were people for everything. The whole Scrum process was super polished. Review process was super polished. Everything was super polished. And I was like a cog in a machine, just doing my ticket, do my ticket. Okay, do the next ticket, you know. But yeah, this other company was super messy. So oh yeah, how to be a front end developer. Yeah, so that's the ideal situation. Um, so you communicate with the back end engineers. Yep. So hopefully there's like docs, or especially if there's TypeScript is really nice, being able to see all the types and you can see it that way, which is nice. But yeah, usually there's some kind of docs or something. If it's not finished, yeah, you have to use mock data, which is a pain, but you can do it. And then for the design not being done, oh my gosh, it's also a pain. You just kind of have to plan on recoding everything later. Just kind of don't be too much of a perfectionist because it's going to change anyway. It's terrible. It's terrible. um Yeah. Yeah, but I've never done I've done full stack on like just my own projects, and it's it's nice to be in control, but it's also really nice to just be able to focus on one area, you know? So if you have a really good back end team, that you can either ask questions, or if there's like some crazy logic on the front end you're going to have to do because just one piece of data isn't being returned, you could be like, hey guys, why am I doing this? I'm not calling them, but hey guys, we just need this one more property returned in this object, please. Can you do it? And they're like, oh yeah, I can do
The
that
part
tonight.
that would drive me nuts though, because I would just be like, hop to the
You
back
just do it yourself.
at that
Right, right.
field, hop to the front end. And that would drive me crazy that I'd have to wait to like have a conversation and then go. But maybe it's more structured
Yeah.
that way
And
if I have someone
it
hopping off.
depends. It also depends on how much work there is to do, right? I mean, if you have tons of work to do on the front end already, then having someone else handle all that stuff on the back end is really nice. Otherwise, you're spread too thin, you know? If
Some
it's a
other
small,
tickets you could just go do while you're waiting on the back end of.
yeah. So if there's
Okay.
tons of work to do on the front end, I don't want to be distracted by having to go into the back end and fix stuff up there too, you know? Um, and it's the same, I mean, it's the same with design. Like I I literally was using, not today, but like yesterday morning, I spent the entire morning coming up with mock-ups for this new navigation design, and and doing tons of research too, like what other apps do, and what uh like for footers and side nav bars and headers, etc., and where buttons go, and etc. um and that time could have been spent on some front end stuff, you know? So having designers to do that for you while you're working on the front end stuff that they can't do, that's what makes sense. That's why companies end up hiring more people when they can afford them, right? Is because you could get a lot more work done if you have people dedicated to it. Um, but you also have to make sure you don't to grow to, yeah, here's what happens. Startups get tons of money from funding. Then they hire a bunch of people to get a lot of stuff done really fast. And after all that stuff gets done really fast, then they don't need all those people anymore. And then they do layoffs. That's what ends up happening. So if you get hired, just count on, I mean, I don't want to, this is not a downer. This is just reality, okay? If you get hired by a startup that just got this huge round of funding, think of it as a short-term gig. Always think of it as a short-term gig, even if you're a full-time salaried employee. It's not a sure thing that you're going to be with them for years or whatever. I've never been at a company for more than a year. I think 11 months is my record right now.
Gloria
um,
has a question, by the way.
oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you about the startup. Like, how do you manage your time in terms of deciding what to do? Because it sounds like you're doing wearing lots of hats, and how do you do that? Because I've only worked like established companies, or sometimes with small
Yeah.
companies where, I do different things, but with a startup, how does that work? If you're like their first, or it sounds like you're one of a handful of employees, or maybe even their first employee.
I'm their first hired employee. There's three co-founders, one being paid right now. um yeah, so how do I you learning to code is just the first step, right? And a lot of developers stop there. They just get better at coding. Um But if you can get more into a business and product mindset, then you can learn how to prioritize. Think about the customers and the users and the business, and you'll be like, okay, tweaking this little spacing here and changing the color of this button or whatever is not gonna, it's the providing value thing, right? it would be nice and it'd be really easy to knock out, but it's not going to provide nearly as much value as reorganizing this navigation so that it's not as confusing to users and they end up leaving out of frustration, right? You want to keep your users, make them happy and make them actually use your product. And so like being in the business mindset and the product mindset is very different. No, it's not that different from being in the coding mindset, but you have no, it is. It is. Because in the coding mindset, you're obsessed with just solving the problem, right? You're like, oh man, I want to get this code working and blah, blah, blah. But when you're in the business mindset and you want it to be perfect and you want it to be flawless and bug free and elegant code, elegant JavaScript. You've heard of that book, right? Or eloquent? No, wait, eloquent or elegant? I
Eloquent.
forget.
The first book I ever read on
Yeah.
coding.
Yeah. So, so like coding nerds get into this stuff, but business product people don't care. It's about the value you're bringing. Oh, you've got it, but it's blurred out. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I read the introduction. It was a very good introduction. That's as far as I got.
You're not wrong though. Like you are right. At the end of the day, it's a business. They want to make money. They want product, and like you have to figure out how to add to that goal.
Right, right. So I'm looking at this app. It's a social media app, and I'm like, they don't have. It's a social media app that has no mobile app. Like, who's gonna go on their phone, open up the browser, search for this thing in their browser and use social media that way? Nobody. They want to click the button, they want to see the little red badge if they have notifications. Easy, fast. So I know from a business user standpoint, having a mobile app is a pretty high priority. And that's a higher priority than like constantly changing the spacing or layout or all these little tweaks that designers can get obsessed with. Designers can get obsessed with perfect design. Coders can get obsessed with perfect code, but business product people don't care. They care about the are users using the app? Are they using it in the way it's supposed to be used? um, yeah. So anyway,
Super, thanks.
yeah, did that answer your question? I was just talking more. I don't know.
Yes, no, that's really helpful because I guess that's where you add value versus, if they hire someone who's just interested in coding or designing, you can look at the what the customer wants and speak to that versus, getting wrapped up in your specific role.
Yeah, and I mean, it's nice to have people, and this is once again for bigger companies, it's nice to have people who are interested in just heads down coding, you know? Um, and in a certain sense, I've felt like I've been wasted on coding because it's not really where my strength is. Shh, don't tell anyone. I might need to get another job coding. But but my strength is in all of these other things, like even management or prioritizing or designing or marketing or all of this other stuff, having a coding background makes me even better at all those things because I understand the complexity involved. I understand how long things are going to take. I understand that this is more complicated than you think, actually, dude, and this is why. And this is why we can't get it done this afternoon as opposed to 2 weeks from now, So having that background, that technical knowledge and experience helps with any of those things. But I can see how I might end up pivoting. If I stay at this company and we end up getting more money and hiring more developers, I might end up coding very little. We'll see. Um, but that's if I'm more valuable, we're doing other things, It's just like
What are you aiming for? And I'm very sorry because I'm cutting, but like head of product, CTO, where are you going with this?
I am not a planner. I'm not a planner. I do not have a long-term goal. my goal is to work at a company. My goal is to work with people that I like to work with and they like working with me, and doing stuff that is engaging and challenging, but also having enough time and money to be able to do fun stuff with my family and maybe travel around in our schoolie, possibly. I'm sitting in it right now. Um, so I have very simple desires. I'm not ambitious. I'm not an ambitious person. I just have desires. Or is that ambition? What is ambition anyway? Like, I'm not about climbing a ladder or something. I'm not out for more status or something. I just want to have fun and help other people have fun. And if I have to code and make money to do that, I'll do it.
I have a question.
Okay. Who has a question?
I have a question.
Okay.
Sorry guys, I was on the train. I can't show my face now, but I just got home. But you're amazing, Martha. Thank you so much for sharing your light with us. I'm actually similar to you where I enjoy just like smile on somebody's face, right? So like having that sense of, I don't know, like I want to be valuable, right? Like I want to do something that somebody's going to be like, all right, I need this and I want it and thank you. And so what you said about like having the background in technical, like having technical knowledge is going to help you with understanding the business aspect of things. And I do come from finance as well, where I use my analytical skills to build, like actual business analytics, right? So how would you sell yourself? Like, how do you actually like talk about these skills that you have? Like, do you give examples or you just actually talk about like what you bring to the table? Like, you understand the big picture, you love, collaborating on ideas, you like organize, like, or do you, like I said, like maybe you have some specific projects that you worked on and that's how you actually explain what you've done so that you don't just say, oh, I'm the best, like hire me. um Thanks.
Um, yeah, it's funny because the demo video, like I've even done like live coding challenges and such, and it's so funny because when I did those, like I did algorithm challenges live, and it was so nerve-wracking because I'm terrible at algorithms. And I'm just like doing the simplest, like the lowest level, and I'm still having trouble. But it's like, but even like super senior engineers were so impressed that I was even doing that. Because they wouldn't want to do that live. They wouldn't want to do an algorithm challenge live, even though they had way more experience than I did. Um, and it kind of and even putting myself in that situation shows something about me. What does it show? I don't know. I bet I should ask people what it shows. Like what what does that show? It shows that I'm not afraid.
To make your own opportunity.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to look stupid.
Yeah.
How about that? I'm not
I was
afraid.
gonna say fearless.
Fearless. Yeah.
Fearless. Okay. Yep.
Fearless.
Fearless. I mean, someone could be fearless just because they're a sociopath or something. I mean, there's a different kind
What's
of.
the worst that can happen?
Yeah, I'm willing to take risks. I'm willing to basically put myself out there. Uh, it probably showed I had a sense of humor. It gave people a taste of what it would be like to talk to me or to code with me. It showed my approach, how I approach problems, uh, coding problems. It showed that I could communicate what I was thinking, which is a huge deal. If you're working on a team communicate what you're thinking, communicate what the problem is, even if you don't solve the problem, like which I rarely did. I usually had to look up the answer. Yay, AI. um, even if I had to look it up, and then I would look at the answer, I'm like, oh, that is so good. Oh, and then I'd be like, oh, look at what they did here, and oh, I have to look that up now. I didn't think about this approach and blah blah blah. So it wasn't even about solving the answer. It was showing that I was learning, I was curious, I was communicating, and I wasn't afraid to do all that in public. I mean, what the heck? Um, and oh yeah, the reason I even started doing those was because I would freeze up so badly when I was doing them for interviews. I just freeze up, totally freeze up. So I'm like, I better just start doing this in public. So I stopped just freezing up. I still freeze up. It didn't work, but it was fun anyway. um, yeah, marketing yourself. I don't know. My everyone's approach has to be different, I guess. People do get impressed when you do like side projects. I was doing before I got a job, I was after I was laid off from one of my jobs, I started building some projects and doing coding videos on what I was working on. But then I got hired. Actually, that was through LinkedIn, and that was a recruiter who saw one of my videos. And she knew that I was a perfect fit. See, she already knew that I was a perfect fit. I didn't have to prove anything because she already knew. She watched my video. She looked at my portfolio. She's like, this is exactly who we're looking for. So my interview process was a breeze because they already knew. Um, so I don't know. You just got to try things and find something that works for you, I guess, because that's just what I did. But who knows what you could do? You could come up with something totally different and it would work even better. I don't know. Um, but how do you lessen the risk for them? You know, these companies have so much money to work with, and they want to hire the right person, uh, and you're a risk. As the less they know about you, the more of a risk it is for them. So you can put yourself in their frame of mind, like, how can I make it less of a risk for them so that they know everything they need to know about me before they even contact me? Or well, ideally they contact me, right? I mean, I don't even have to contact them. So yeah, how can I make it less of a risk for them so they know enough about me that they have no doubt who they're getting, you know? Um, yeah. And I can't answer that question for you. You know what you're capable of and what you aren't and stuff. But just don't be afraid to look foolish and try stuff. Just try stuff. Try stuff and see what works and what doesn't work. Experiment. Any other questions? We're getting. Oh, okay. What? One more.
Um, hey, Martha. I
Hey.
just had a quick question for you. One, just your story is very, very inspiring. I'll say, I'm kind of trying to do the same thing you're doing right now. I figured out just recently building in public gets you a lot further in code applications. And so, kind of a question for you. As of now, I have maybe I'll say two projects that I'm building. The one in this boot camp, right? I'm using a certain tech stack, right? I'm at the point where my issue is not even tech stack. I can learn anything. Like I've learned enough in enough tech stacks to say I get what's going on. I don't care what tech stack I have to learn to get a job, but what I guess you kind of touched on this with the React Native thing. Like, there's more people, there's more jobs available for that. So I guess for someone who I have been focusing more on web and full stack kind of showcases when I do like demos and all that, is that still, I guess, the best approach to take when doing all these demos and showcasing like hey, this is the value I bring, or is there a way to more so I can learn anything? It doesn't matter what the tech stack is, you
Mm.
know, I just want to bring I want to bring that type of value to a company instead of like, I only know how to do this kind of stuff. All right. So yeah,
Right.
if that makes sense, that's my question. Um,
Yeah, I mean, the projects you've worked on, or you're demoing things and learning in public, have they all been kind of the same tech stack that you've been demoing?
yeah, I would say honestly, when I learned about this boot camp, I had already built like a job tracker basically, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't all the way as similar to this to do app, but I knew like I could do this because I kind of built this already, maybe with a little less features or whatever. But I was familiar. I was familiar with TypeScript, all the front end, back end, database. Like I had already done that already. Um, and I was hoping maybe by building this, I could, get that internship or whatever and kind of go
Mm-hmm.
from there. But uh,
Well, you know what's really nice about React Native is you can use the same backend. So if you already have a project you've built and you've done the backend, just make a mobile app for it too. Just be like, okay, so I made this project and here it is. And si and now I'm going to make a mobile app for it using React Native. Uh, and and
ah,
and then walking through like the differences that the different approach you have to take with mobile apps, the different considerations, and just learn. I mean, you're still using React and TypeScript. You're going to have the same backend, but you're going to have to find out how to get your honestly, the biggest problem with mobile development is just getting the stupid emulators and simulators running. Okay.
okay,
It's
okay,
so it's so easy. When I went from mobile development back to web development, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can just run npm start and it's there in the browser. It's like magic.
right,
Wow. You know,
yeah,
struggling with all the configuration and your local development setup with native stuff, and then being able to test it, like using test flight on your phone, being able to test it on different sizes of devices. And I mean, it's so complicated. And this is why a mobile developer, I mean, actually, the guy who hired me to do that app in the first place, he was a developer. He was a code. He thought to himself, like, how hard could it be? How hard could it be
mhm,
to I already know how to code. How hard could it be to just slap this mobile app together? And he started doing it and he's like, "Nah, this is I'm not gonna do this." So he
really,
so he hired me to do it. He did the back end and he was going to do the mobile app and he's like, "Oh, this is way too complicated. Like, get
Hmm,
someone else to do this for me. I will pay them. I will pay someone else to do this for me."
I watched
right,
one video on how to get the emulator and simulators up, and I was like, nah.
No, not worth the pain.
Other desktops for me.
It's so painful. Um, Yeah, if you were interested in a React Native tutorial, I can't recommend Maximilian Schwartzmuller enough. I think Academind is the name of his channel, Academind.
a
Um,
cat of mine.
and
Okay,
he's amazing. In fact, if you just want to level up in React or anything, just find a tutorial by him and it's amazing. But yeah, that's how I learned React Native, was just getting his tutorial and just working through it. And that's what I used to build the app. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna follow along with this tutorial and build this app. Um, and I think he keeps it updated because there are a lot of new updates, especially with like Expo. Anyway, but yeah, React Native. Yeah, so I guess that would be a recommendation, is if you already have a back end that you've created, just go make a mobile app for it. Um,
that's a great
but
idea. That's a great idea, actually. Thank you. Thank you.
There you go. Yay.
Well,
And I miss it. It is very fun. Mobile development it's a huge pain, but it's also super fun and satisfying when you can do it. I so hope I get to build a mobile app soon for this company that I'm with, because man, that'll be satisfying. Seeing the little icon on your phone, like, whoa, that's an app I made. Click, it's a real app. It's on my phone.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
I would love to see Callie Sloth pop up on mine. So, anyone want to take on the challenge of building it, go for it. But Martha, this was so great. This was really fun. I also apologize if I took too much time up with my own questions, but I was just too excited for you to be here. And the recording will be posted on the Coding with Callie website tomorrow. Thanks again
Awesome.
so much for coming, and we hope you'll come again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is really fun. Yep. All right. Talk to you later, Kelly.
All right, bye guys.
Thank you
See you
so
next
much, Martha.
Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome. See you on LinkedIn.